You are listening to I'll Follow You, a podcast about creative process and what really goes on behind the scenes of an artistic life. My name is Allison Clark, and I love talking to musicians, writers, visual artists, and other brilliant thinkers about their working methods, obsessions, and pet projects. Guess what? Just by tuning in, you're part of the inner circle now. Hello, and welcome back to I'll Follow You. Today, I'm incredibly psyched to share with you my conversation with science writer and medical intuitive Allison Clark. Allison is a heart-centered, holistically-minded healer who takes into consideration all aspects of a person, not just their body and not just their soul. Her approach is an alchemy of years of training, scientific research, and personal mind, body, and spirit work. She has studied clairvoyant and energy healing techniques for well over a decade and has learned from experts including Cyndi Dale, Meehan, Bruce Lipton, and Robert Moss. She also graduated with honors from the Open University of Catalonia with a master's degree in nutrition with a focus on clinical nutrition and nutrigenomics, and is also triple certified as a functional nutritionist, a culinary nutrition expert, and a holistic health coach. Her current mission as a healer is to help women learn to trust their intuition and embrace their unique spirit so that they can live a fulfilled life. In our wide-ranging conversation today, Allison gives us the lowdown on her recently published research paper that's all about the importance of a healthy mucin layer, how to keep our gut-brain axis healthy and happy, especially after hardcore workouts, her approach to working at the cutting edge, but also extremely ancient, intersection of science and spirituality, why she hates the term and practice of biohacking, getting in touch with our five senses in moments where we might find ourselves in shutdown or overwhelm, particularly after long binges on social media, deprogramming from the unsustainable timetables and workloads of the corporate world, and the ways that culturally we're overcomplicating our approaches to health. For links where to find Allison's writing and services online, please visit my website, queenofpeaches.com, for more information in the show notes. And now, my conversation with Allison Clark. Allison Clark, it's amazing to see you on my Zoom screen and also be talking to you.
I know, I'm so excited. I know,
Yes.
I feel like it's been forever.
It's been forever, and you just I always try to gush on people right at the beginning of a podcast, and you're just so brilliant, and your social media presence is just such a spot of sort of unhinged sanity, if that makes sense.
I don't know about my social media presence or lack thereof.
Well, and that's something I definitely want to talk about is just, the way that you have not succumbed to that sort of, imperative to be on social media at all times. But when you are on social media, I'm just who is this brilliant person? And why am I so blessed to know her? Because you just, are such, have so much to say. And I want to bring all of that out of you today as much as we can, at least.
You're making me blush.
Oh, that's the goal. That's the goal always. Well, shoot, before we get going, I mean, I want to dive right in, but also I'm glad that, we had just a little scheduling reschedule where we didn't record this when we originally were planning to. And I'm glad that we didn't, because you posted about your new article that just came out. So
yes.
Just give me a little, sketch of what your publication was about that was just released.
Oh God. Okay, let's see if I can try to summarize this the best way that I can in layman's terms. So I've been collaborating on a lot of papers with a colleague of mine. She was actually one of my professors when I was doing my master's. And so we've co-written a lot of papers together, and she works for a research institution in France. And she's been focusing a lot of her research on the connection between the gut microbiome, which are all the trillions of microbes that inhabit our intestines, or gastrointestinal tract rather, and the effect that it has on endurance exercise. And so the latest installment, which was actually quite a new topic, it was kind of more of a hypothetical review paper, if you will, because there haven't been a lot of studies, particularly in humans. There have been some rodent studies, but long story short is the role, we looked in the role that mucins play in potentially optimizing endurance exercises. So mucin is basically mostly made up of water, some carbohydrates, a little bit of protein in the mucus layer of your intestinal tract. So we have different mucus layers, like in our mouth, that's kind of the smooth, or our orifices, down there, and then also our gastrointestinal tract, and it forms a protective barrier, so it keeps microbes, pathogens out, toxins, other harmful chemicals, from reaching our bloodstream and things like that. But it also provides a food source for beneficial microbes, and it also helps protect the function of our intestinal barrier. So the quote unquote leaky gut that everybody talks about, so that hyperpermeability, when that happens, when you are under a lot of emotional or physical stress, or you have other stress from infections, inflammation, toxin exposure, the proteins that keep our intestinal cells together, almost like the mortar between bricks, if you will, becomes too permeable. And so other things, so unwanted molecules, immune molecules, food, things like that, proteins go into our bloodstream, and it puts our immune system in kind of hyper alert and can cause a lot of inflammation. So basically, long story short, is you want to have a good, healthy, mucus layer in your intestines to protect the lining of your gut, to protect the functioning of that barrier system, and it serves as an important nutrient source for beneficial microbes. And so when your beneficial microbes are working for you, then you can optimize actually your energy production. This is somewhat hypothetical. I mean, we're going off of mostly rodent studies here, but we do think that it could be translated into human athletes. And you hear a lot of talk about like macros, so like how much grams of carbs, supplementing with like creatine or branched chain amino acids, even the use of certain types of fats and things like that to improve athletic performance. But here we're or even in other studies that have focused on certain gut microbes in particular that are related to that are seen in high performing athletes and might be related to athletic performance. But here we're looking at something new, a new aspect of the gut microbiome interaction, as it has to do with kind of the mucin ecosystem, if you will.
That's amazing. So like, what's the next phase? I mean, is like, what would it entail to have more like human
studies, also actually studies
yeah.
and courses are actually a great model for human athletes, especially like Arab horses who do endurance racing, things like that. I would see that first, and then possibly human studies as well.
Like, what's the timeline on something like that? I mean, how much longer will it take to get to that place?
It would probably take a couple of years at least. Well, first you need funding. And it takes a long time once you do a race, so you would probably sample at, let's say one endurance racing event. You would take samples before and after the racing event, fecal samples and plasma samples, for example, and analyze that. And then once you do all the analysis, and then you can, you write the manuscript and you prepare it, that takes at least a year. I mean, a lot of times it takes a really long time to publish. So by the time you get the funding and then you actually publish, 2 to 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
in the meantime, I mean, since like, I know that you're a real like avid hiker and stuff, I mean, do you like take some of this stuff like into your own practice, like as in your own athletics that you participate in? I mean,
I'm definitely not an endurance,
sure,
hardcore endurance athlete, just because actually the research that I've done on endurance, exercise has deterred me away for wanting to do that, just because I think it's, with the exception of a handful of kind of unicorn individuals, I think it's just very hard on the body.
Yeah.
And most people are not meant to be doing, regular endurance athletic activities and things like that. It's just it can be very inflammatory, but I have keeping that in mind. So I do some trail races here and there, nothing hardcore, definitely nothing, I maybe do one or two throughout the year. But yeah, I do keep in mind, like I'll notice if I do a hard run and, if I have gastrointestinal symptoms afterwards, and I definitely do think, okay, well, how can I alleviate that? They talk about training the gut too when you're, especially when you're doing running or biking, how to train your gut to tolerate a higher ingestion of carbohydrates, particularly in the form of gels or kind of like isotonic water mixtures and things like that, hypertonic water mixtures, things like that. So yeah, I mean, I do keep it all in mind. And I do notice like when I am stressed that it does affect my gut, and like I got to slow things down, kind of eat more gut friendly foods, things like that for sure. But I've moved away from focusing on any one single kind of probiotics or any one single quote unquote beneficial microbe, because it's just not useful. And I think after all the research that we've done so far, what we've come up with so far is that we don't know a lot about the gut microbiome. And there is no such thing as a healthy composition, quote unquote, gut microbiota composition. Each person is unique. And so a healthy gut microbiota composition, that unique ecology that we harbor within our gastrointestinal system, is unique for each person. Yes, we have studied, and we do know beneficial microbes, and there are known pathogens and things like that. But the most important thing is keeping that inner terrain balanced and healthy, so it's resilient, it stays stable over time, and it's resilient to different stressors, whether that's physical exercise, mental stress can really affect your gut, antibiotics, changing of your diet, changing of your environment, changing your circadian, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, I just came off Lexapro. Like I, sort of in the pandemic was like, hey, I'm going to take Lexapro for a few minutes because it's like I'm losing my mind from stress. And yeah, I just came off it literally like 2 months ago. And it's like, yeah, my gut still, it just doesn't know what's happening, like my digestion's weird. Yeah. And like the tum area is still very unsettled. Those that connection
really, and there's also what's called the gut brain axis. So it's bidirectional communication between your brain and your enteric nervous system. So the nervous system that resides within our gastrointestinal tract, and our neurotransmitters, stress hormones, and immune molecules all communicate with, did I say microbes? All communicate with each other via the vagus nerve.
Right.
And so, yeah. So when you get those butterflies in your stomach, or you're anxious or you're stressed and you're running to the bathroom, that's a legit thing. It's not a psychosomatic manifestation. What it is, it's the gut brain axis in action, and you're stressed out. And your gut's not having
it. Yeah, for all of my my pals listening to this, who we all did theater together, I think that was very familiar. Sort of like everyone taking turns, using the bathroom, depending on how much stage fright and anxiety there was about performance, at any given show. Okay, well, thank you for giving us that little walk through your recent research. Like, congratulations on having that paper come out. Super exciting. So obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but like, so there's this whole part of your life, which is the science, and you just hit us with like a lot of,
nerdy things. Sorry.
Really super nerdy things, which it's like, I find very soothing. Like, I love listening to people talk about stuff that I don't understand, because it's like, I groove on the language, it's kind of like, even if I don't understand what you're talking about, I'm like, this girl knows what she's talking about. And it's like awesome. And even if I don't understand it, like, I love listening to people talk about things that they're expert in. So you have this whole nerdy side of your science, but then you're medical intuitive, like you're super psychic and meditative and everything. And that's how we know each other from way back here in Chicago. And so like, talk to us a little bit about that collision, if you want to call it a collision. And because I feel like, to me, it's like, of course science and spirituality link up and inform each other and are sort of two sides of the same coin, they're on the same continuum. But like, in the world today, it's like there is a lot of conflict between those two things, you know, spiritual people who don't want to listen to science, and science people who denigrate the spiritual. And so like, how is that for you to like be at the intersection of those things kind of intentionally, like for your life? You know, it's like the two big parts of what you do.
Yeah. I mean, this has been happening, I think, for centuries. You know, the battle, the tension between science and spirituality. I think, you know, thinking back to it, when I always loved being a student. I'll probably be a perpetual student. It's just the way I am, my Gemini moon.
Yeah.
Like, I always love to be studying and learning new things, but I always was interested in science, and particularly biology, but I was like horrible at math. So early on in college, I took a U-turn and decided to study anthropology and Spanish instead of studying more biology, possibly veterinary medicine, things like that. I took one look at that calculus book and I was like, oh, hell no. But I've always been interested, and I've always liked to learn about, you know, different topics around anatomy, physiology, microbiology, or just like random things, quantum basics of quantum physics and stuff. And then I started in my early 20s doing energy work. We went to the same meditation school, went through an intense clairvoyant training, and then I went on to take other energy medicine, energy healing trainings since then. But I noticed, I think, particularly through my clairvoyance, I would give somebody a reading and they might complain about like, oh, I'm dealing with headaches, been dealing with a lot of digestive issues, or, you know, menstrual cycle issues. And I was just able to see clairvoyantly their organs and see a lot about what was going on a physical level, but also look beyond that into the energetic roots of what was going on, and the spiritual or maybe even karmic issues that were tying into the physical symptoms. And so I think because I had that background in science and, you know, in anatomy and physiology, I could make sense of what I was seeing, or maybe it was those people's bodies were just communicating with me in that way, or I was receiving that kind of information. And I found it to be very grounding for the people who I worked with, because it wasn't this kind of like woo woo out there, like, oh, I see this like purple color coming into your womb. You know, I would say like, oh, okay, well, yeah, you got like low progesterone levels. Looks like you're not ovulating on time. And that's because you're not, so that's what's going on physically. Your ovaries look like they're working fine, but you're just not producing a lot of estrogen right now. Your ovaries are a little bit shut down because you're not using your feminine energy enough. You know what I mean? So I'd like tie it into a way that made sense to be like, oh shit, you're right. You know, I'm working this corporate job, you know, to stick it to the man. I'm like, you know, always, you know, working with a lot of men, go, you know, so I think that's kind of how it naturally progressed. And then as I worked more and more, I think I focused more on kind of the medical intuitive. And then I actually came across the term medical intuition. I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that is kind of what I do. And so I think it's become, a natural progression. And I actually embrace the science and spirituality. I don't think they have to be separate by any means. And I think, you know, I definitely don't think you need to have science to explain everything, or randomized controlled trials to quote unquote prove everything that we intuitively know, or that we've, our ancestors have known for millennia. You know what I mean? It's cool when you have a study that comes out and you're like, oh yeah, I told you so. I knew it. My intuition knew it. You know, now I don't sound like a crazy person. But again, I don't feel like I need that. And I also think that a lot of us have a hard, especially in the science world, we have a hard time embracing that mystery, the mystery of the unknown, and kind of accepting that we aren't going to know everything that's going on, or how the universe works, or how our bodies works, or how miraculous healings occur. And I think we need to get better as a society of embracing that. I think indigenous cultures and other ancient cultures were much better about that, about understanding, kind of creating from the void, kind of stepping into the unknown, surrendering, being okay with that mystery. And we're just not in our society. We always have to label everything. We have to categorize everything. We have to study it. We have to attack it. We have to, quote unquote, find what's quote unquote wrong. what's going on. I take a much different approach to healing and health. I guess you would say I would take more of a feminine approach, kind of more like what is, again, kind of getting more philosophical or spiritual about it. You know, what does healing mean? How do you want to, what does feeling whole mean for you? How can we get back to balance instead of like, how can we attack this microbe and like, let's eradicate it and let's, battle the cancer, and that's just not how I approach healing.
And it's so funny because it's like, as you're saying this, which I love and totally is very apparent, but you also, I think that a lot of times it's easy to think of feminine energy as being sort of dispersed and kind of undefined, whereas you're able to like bring this feminine energy into precision, like, because I feel like that's like one of the hallmarks of your style is that you are so precise, like as a writer, as a thinker. So I don't know, like how does that land with you? Like, do you feel like I'm a precise person, or do you feel like how does that feel when I say that? Like,
yeah, I think I'll say I wouldn't necessarily use the word precise. I mean, I feel flattered by it, but I would say I'm a no BS kind of person. I just get straight to the point. So I think over the years, I've gotten good with both my scientific research and my energy work. I'm pretty good at asking good questions. And so I think when you ask good questions, you can get good answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, over the years, I've gotten really good at trusting my intuition, trusting the messages that I get, trusting my claircognizance. Whereas before I might have doubted it, or I might have doubted the pictures that I was seeing, or the messages, the information. And now I think I am very laser focused, and I trust it, and the energy just flows really quickly, and I'll get the information very quickly. So when I do energy work or readings, I'm a no BS kind of person. I'm not gonna spend 20 minutes explaining to you this allegory, this big complicated metaphor. I mean, we can do that. It's great. It has time and place and it's beautiful. But I also tend to do 45-minute sessions. And so I got a lot of work to do in those 45 minutes. And I'm like, let's just get to it. All right, you're dealing with this, boom, boom, boom. This is what's going on. This is how, if you're open to it, this is how we can work on healing it or releasing it, blah, blah, blah. Let's just get right to it, because you can also lose people too when you get so lost in sort of kind of the superfluous stuff, the excess story, and sometimes that's just too much. Sometimes they just let's just get down to it.
Well, especially if someone's suffering, right? I mean,
right.
It's like you work with
They've already
like
had the runaround. They don't want to eat all this like fluff and mumbo jumbo. They just want to know the source of what's going on with them.
Yeah, because especially, I think if you do a lot of work with women around fertility and stuff, I mean, you were talking about womb energy and feminine energy and, your uterus and your ovaries. And yeah, it's like, yeah, especially like in the way that women sort of still get, misdiagnosed, in Western, allopathic medicine. So I can imagine, yeah, someone coming to you being at the end of their rope emotionally and just being like, I don't want to hear about the purple clouds,
Right. Yeah. And I think I do tend to attract those kind of clients who've kind of been through a lot. They've maybe gone to different experts or doctors or even healers, and they still, nothing's really moved the needle, so to speak. And, I support them and I say, hey, I see you. It's really shitty what you're going through. You're not alone. I hear your story. You're not crazy. You're not alone. Let's see what we can do here. Let's get down to it. Let's get down to business. Let's get curious and open, and let's see what's going on here for sure. And then I'll tie, I think what helps ground it is then if there's a scientific, biological, medical aspect to it, I'll tie that in as well. Whenever, I say like, okay, well, just so this is what's going on physically as well. So it's not totally, out there woo-woo crazy. This is why you're having these physical symptoms. And then I'll bring practical things into it as well. It's like, I mean, I'm not a licensed medical, specialist or anything like that, but I will, give them resources, or say, always check with your doctor, but, these kind of foods might be healing for you, or these, supplements, although I'm not huge on supplements so much anymore. That kind of stuff, or this kind of exercise, gentle healing, or acupuncture, that kind of stuff. Any other, healing modality too, I'll also suggest.
So speaking of acupuncture, I mean, what, on your journey of, again, both, on the, medical education, scientific side, but then also on the healing side, like, what is it that brought you to just claiming that identity as like a medical intuitive rather than doing like traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture or any other modality? Like, where was the juice for you in that? Like, did you ever consider branching off into any of those other modalities or?
I mean, I've studied different modalities for sure. It's just my nature, perpetual student. But I would say, you got to focus your energy on what you're good at. And if you spread yourself too thin, sometimes you'll be a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And I've just found that kind of my special sauce is just combining the science and spirituality, kind of that medical intuitive side of things, because I understand the science of the human body, the physiology, the anatomy, all the way down to, the genetic expressions, the microbial interactions, the molecular things that are going on, a bit of quantum biology as well. But I also have other kind of spidey senses, right? And so I can't untangle the two. And I do like pulling on ancient Hindu traditions, traditional Chinese medicine when I'm looking at certain subtle energy bodies, certain energy channels that are typically used in those traditions, sacred geometry too, things like that. But I don't say that I focus on necessarily one ancient practice or one tradition per se. It's sort of a mix. But really the focus is sort of the medical intuition.
Well, and that's so funny. I mean, because that really, thank you for that, because that makes so much sense. I mean, based on what you were saying, as far as like, it can't be split apart, in that medicalized sense of sort of Western, ways of looking at things. It's like, it makes sense that it would be a grab bag because again, it's like, it's the energy that you're working with, so it's like whether you're accessing that energy through one discipline or another, it's like, that's what matters is where it gets you, right? Like not where it's coming from.
And, it depends on the person I'm working with. So if they have more of a background in female goddesses or something, I might pick up on certain, female goddesses or archetypes that they could work with. Sometimes I'll pick up on certain symbols and it may not make sense to me. I may not have a lot of knowledge, but I'm like, oh, I'll see like a Celtic cross here. And they're like, oh yeah, da, 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 da. No, I can tell they have a lot of knowledge about it and it's very significant to them. So, like I have enough knowledge about certain things where I can kind of pull it in and use it and it'll make sense for the client, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. No, and I guess the sort of the other question behind that question was just sort of like, because you do see people who are doing Reiki, in hospitals and stuff like that. And so I just was wondering if there was any temptation to want to go one of those quote unquote sort of legitimized kind of routes, that would allow you to be sort of more in those, again, like Western medicalized spaces, sort of more legitimately, so to speak, rather than just like, oh, I'm out here doing my own thing,
I mean, I would love that. The thing is that the reality is I'm living in Spain and they're definitely behind on that kind of stuff, as opposed to the US. I mean, they're ahead of the US in a lot of other aspects with healthcare, but as far as alternative and complementary treatments, they're behind. And so they're like acupuncture and Reiki are just now becoming more popular. But anything other than that is like, oh, it's out there. And I'll talk to people and they'll be open, to different forms of energy healing. And they understand the chakras and things like that. But it's definitely not as known or as appreciated or as valued. It's definitely not viewed as a legitimate kind of practice, like osteopathy, for example, I guess is not seen quite as like a medical doctor, so I mean there's like different things like that, and any of these kind of treatments are outside of what would be included in the public healthcare system, and people don't want to pay for that. People definitely don't want to pay premium for that, and there's just not a tradition of paying a lot for those kind of other services that are not included in the public healthcare system. But ideally, I mean, I would love to. I would love to be a medical intuitive for a doctor who's dealing with clients with these weird, mysterious symptoms and things like that. But the reality is where I live, it's just not viewed as a legitimate practice yet.
God, yeah. How amazing would that be to like work in a doctor's office and be able to provide that,
I know.
in that concrete sort of referral kind of way. Like,
Yeah.
let's go over here. But
Or do these tests, right? I suggest
yeah.
you do these kind of, these tests because it's what she's dealing with.
God, how beautiful would that be?
I know.
We hold the vision for it. We
I
hold
know.
it. You're on the vanguard. I mean, you really are on the vanguard. I mean, this is one of the questions that I was going to ask at the end of our talk, but I want to talk about it now. I mean, talking about being on the vanguard of things, because it's like, what is coming next in sort of like health research? Like, what are you seeing? Like, what are the trends? I mean, we were joking about like coffee enemas,
Yeah.
like when we were emailing each other.
I
It's kind of
know.
like, as far as like things that make the rounds, as far as like suddenly everyone has these health trends. Is there anything that you see coming up that you're like, steer clear of? Because I know you were mentioning that.
Well, I see two different trends going on. So one is the biohacking, and I hate that term, but biohacking, and for those who don't know, biohacking is basically kind of, I don't even know how to describe this in a neutral way, but it's basically kind of utilizing either a technology or a certain kind of routine to kind of bypass some sort of, to kind of make healing occur faster or be easier, basically, to quote unquote optimize your health. The idea is you're kind of scapegoating certain steps and you're kind of doing things the fast way. It's almost like a shortcut, if you will. So I see a lot of biohacking, being more popular. So more technology-based stuff, more tracking, more health tracking devices and sensors. So we have the Oura Ring, you have smart watches that have a lot of different sensors on them, heart rate sensors, SpO2 sensors, heart rate variability, et cetera, kind of thing. You have like red light therapy. There's even some scalar wave therapy that's coming out, which I think is actually pretty exciting and stuff. So there's that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I see people tending more towards the ancient traditions, or looking at nature for their answers. So that's in like the health realm. And then as far as the research, I see things going more. There's been an uptick actually in research that's kind of trying to show the scientific basics for some energy healing aspects. So I see that increasing. So things that we've known to be true for like years and years, like grounding is good for your health. And there's studies that are actually showing that, putting your bare feet on the earth, there's a transfer of ions. It gives you more negative ions and it can improve your immune system. So we're seeing those kind of, for example, just to give an example. And then I see people getting more nitty gritty into like different pathways and genes and SNPs, which are single nucleotide polymorphism. So like gene mutations, and how they affect our health, and then targeted drug therapies for that. So it's kind of like two ends of the spectrum.
So we were also talking before we hit record about this idea of discernment. So it's like, so with all of this coming down the pike and with so much being available, like, how do you recommend people practice discernment? I mean, you should, but B, like practically speaking, like, what does that look like? Like what helps people become more discerning as they're looking for treatments to take on or approaches to take on?
It's hard because, let's be honest, I think in our modern society, we haven't learned, or hasn't been, the idea of discernment hasn't been valued or taught. It's just not. It's usually a hierarchical, top-down kind of approach where you get your information and figure out how to make decisions. Whereas I think, hundreds of years ago, or maybe even not that long, you might have had a spiritual healer or a mentor who would help guide you, help you figure out how to listen to your heart's desire and your intuition, follow your gut, that sort of thing. And we just don't have that anymore. And so what happens, these damn influencers who really are not credited, who don't have a legitimate background or haven't been, through the ropes spiritually, really done the hardcore spiritual, deep inner workings to call themselves a legitimate spiritual healer, or even health expert. And they're just spewing the latest health trends or spiritual trends and, word or phrase of the month. Ascension, my soul codes, fifth dimension, everything's in the 5D, and I'm just channeling this information. And then on the other end of the spectrum, it's like these biohackers and these quote unquote influencers who are talking about the latest diet trends, the supplements, and exercise trends, and it's very polarized. So it's very black and white. It's very much like, this worked for me, so it's going to work for all of you. You have to do it. Sign up now. Only 3 easy payments at $9.99, and miracles are going to happen, and you're going to be pooping unicorns. I mean, honestly, it's like, and so how do you get discernment? Because there's a lot of chatter, right? There's a lot of these influencers who have fancy filters and video editing, techniques, and, all the latest gadgets and gizmos. And so they can really lure you in, and you can get hypnotized by them. And I think it's, what I do is I get my information from various sources. So even if I'm a big fan of a certain person, I will also look at the alternative opinion, just to kind of get a balance and see, okay, well, where's universal truth in this if I can figure it out? And I'm not pretending to know universal truth in all situations, obviously. And also, where's my truth in this? So, right. And so, I even follow some people who are into quantum biology, for example, and they're all about circadian rhythm health, and they're really focused on light exposure and what kind of light and this and that. But I also find that they get too focused on that. And it's also the reality of it is we live in a modern society. We're exposed to artificial light all the time. So it's like, you have to find a balance, and not everybody's going to be walking around with blue blocking glasses and, getting up at sunrise with the bare feet on the floor, looking up at the sunrise at 6 a.m. and, living by candlelight by 7 p.m. It's just, like a la Little House on the Prairie. So I think you have to really, people need to learn to tap into their intuition and their gut. And a lot of times your body will tell you, they'll tell you if this seems right or wrong. If you feel anxious, if you feel tightening, if you feel your heart beating faster, and your breath shortening, that's usually a sign that something's not right. But if you feel excited, if you feel relaxed, if you feel lighter, that's usually, a sign that you're going in the right direction. And sometimes it's trial and error, and we have to be okay with that. We have to be okay with trial and error, and we have to be okay with that. There's no necessarily one right or wrong way to do things. There's no one expert in anything. And that, the journey to health is definitely not non-linear. And I think part of the journey is experimentation and figuring out what's right for your body and getting in touch with your body. So I would say, to answer your question, listen to your body first, because we're so detached from our bodies, and the messages that our bodies are always telling us, that we kind of forget that that's sometimes our biggest clue to if something's right or wrong for us, or, if we're on the right path or not, or if this dude's just full of BS, and oftentimes if you feel like something's off, it most likely is, and you can do your own research, so if you see a video and it seems like a little bit too good to be true, or a little bit too flashy and convincing, well, do your own research, find some books, find other resources, scientific articles, whatever you need to maybe find alternative sources on that to see if it checks out. Because I think a lot of people just don't take that extra step either, not let alone checking with their body, but doing their own research. I think people just take things face value now. And that's kind of the problem of social media. And this is why I don't like social media, because anybody can be a quote unquote expert. But what they're doing is selling snake oil. And it can be dangerous, especially when you're dealing with somebody's health or spiritual well-being, when people are vulnerable. I think it's really dangerous. And I think it's a sin to just take advantage of people like that when they're so vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, and so I would love for you to just like bag on social media for a minute.
Yeah.
Because I know that's like a big bugbear for you right now. And, and it's obviously, I think, especially, in the post Elon Musk Twitter era and, and Zuckerberg being a villain on Facebook and everything, I think that people are starting to sort of break away from the hegemony of social media a little bit more. But I feel like you were on this tip a little before most people were. I mean, again, with your ability to trust your intuition and see things very clearly. But yeah, just talk a little bit more about the snake oil that people are peddling and then how you sort of are countering that, with your own approach to social media, because you're still on it. You're not like a person who like
Yeah,
abandoned it.
but I'm not on it a lot because
Yeah.
I don't like, here's the thing, and part of me, this is my personality. I don't like playing those kind of games. Like, don't tell me that I got to dance around pointing to floating words in a reel, a 30-second reel when I got a lot to say. No, I'm not going to do that. And like, don't tell me that I got to post like X number of days or X number of weeks at this time period. And I have to engage in this way. And I have to comment on X number of posts in order to boost my like. And then I also have to pay Zuckerberg, who has billions of dollars on, Instagram ads. No, I'm sorry. And I'm also not a robot. Not a robot. I'm not here. I'm not a marionette puppet to be, entertained, as an entertainer kind of thing, playing really for the algorithms. No, that's not what I do. My goal is to really teach and kind of share my knowledge and what I've learned, and hopefully a way that makes sense with a little bit of humor in there. And so I think a lot of people play into that popularity game, and I'm just like, I'm too old for that shit. Like, I really don't care how many followers I have, or, I'm not going to play into the trends, not interested in that. Like, I'm all about like, you do you. And I always like the accounts that are very authentic and people just show up, no makeup, no fancy lighting or filters. And they're just like, hey man, this is just what happened. Let's talk about it or whatever. Or they share a funny video or meme or whatever. I'm much more inclined to follow them than somebody who has a perfectly polished, manicured Instagram account. I'm mostly on Instagram. I hate Facebook because just no, I don't like the direction it's going. I associate it much more with Zuckerberg, who I despise as a human. I think he's evil. I think Elon Musk is definitely much more open to freedom of speech, but he's also crazy, and another billionaire who doesn't care about anybody else. So a lot of people get sucked into that, to those, what do you call it? That the trends, and it's the same with the health trends. It's the same thing. So no, there's no, okay, what was supposed to be a creative platform is no longer creative because everybody is doing the same cookie cutter, ridiculous trend, ridiculous formula, and it's boring. Quite frankly, it's boring. And another thing I don't like about social media is it ties into abusing dopamine levels of users. And so you wonder why children, adolescents, and adults have shortened, time, attention spans. Now, why? Thanks to stories and reels, because they're 15 to 90 seconds long. Now, I tend to do longer formats. So my videos sometimes would be 10 minutes. I don't give two shits. I just don't. I got what I got to say, and I'm not going to listen to the freaking, algorithms and, do some lame reel dancing, and have some very superficial message. That's just not my style. Kudos to you if you can make that work and you can do it effectively. That's great. I mean, I'm not judging how people do their stuff, but the problem I have is that it feeds into those the dopamine levels. We don't have attention spans anymore. We don't know how to sit through a longer format video, or blog post or article. Everything has to be short, flashy, scroll. And that's very addicting and it's very dangerous. So I don't like that. I don't like the direction that social media is going. And it was supposed to be a platform that was supposed to be creative and about connection, and it's not. It's about filling the pockets of freaking Zuckerberg and Musk. It's destroying our attention spans and it's ruining our creativity, to be quite honest.
Well, so, as we were talking, about checking in with your body, as far as like what information is valid and, what information to follow. Like, I do find, I mean, even in myself, it's like if I'm a little lax with doing too much social media, it's like, I can't even feel my body anymore. So it's like,
Right.
what, like, can you just like give some advice to people who might be in that situation where it's like, yeah, I would love to trust my body, but I can't even feel my body anymore. Like, how do you start to listen to yourself to be even able to access that level of discernment that you need?
So, a good way is to get in touch with your five physical senses. Okay, that's the first thing, to get in touch with your body. So, if you're sitting down or standing, pay attention to your feet, your sit bones. Pay attention, to your breath, what you can see, what you can smell, what you can hear, and what you can touch. And then I would say focus on the natural rhythms of your body, so your heartbeat and your breath, and then start to slow that down. So as soon as you can have a rhythmic breathing, you don't even have to get into specific numbers of inhalations or exhalations. As long as it's slow and rhythmic, that will calm down immediately your nervous system, and get in touch with your heartbeat. So you can just simply put your hand over your heart or on your wrist, on your pulse, and just kind of check in. And then I always ask, like, what does my body need now? Or how am I feeling? And see if an emotion comes up or a sensation. And then just listen to the first answer that you get and don't doubt it. And then you can kind of do that throughout the day. So a lot of times if you feel dissociated, like, whoa, how did I get in this room? Or like, why did I just open the refrigerator? What am I doing? Or like, oh, wow, I've been floating around on a caffeine buzz and I haven't checked in with my physical body at all, and I haven't eaten in the past like 7 hours. Just have forgiveness, have compassion, and then just check in with yourself. What do you know, the five senses, your breath, your heartbeat, and then what do I need right now? And that's just like a really easy way. And then if you want to go a step further, you can create a grounding cord. So that's just a line of energy that goes from the base of your spine all the way down to the center of the earth, and just have a sense of release. And that grounding cord can look however you want. It can be like a tree, a waterfall, polka dot, rainbow colored, cheetah print. It really doesn't matter, as long as it gives you a sense of release and safety.
Yeah, as a person who's very mental, I mean, I have a Gemini rising, I've learning to ground, like energetically ground, was huge for me. Just being able to like access the feeling, yeah, of the earth and of myself as an earth creature,
Right.
an earthbound creature is hugely, hugely healing. So yeah,
yeah. And some people are into like holding on to those healing stones or crystals. And sometimes too, if you have a lot of mental chatter, which can definitely bounce you out of your body, make you feel dissociated, you can write down a list of like to-do list or priorities, or a list of whatever emotions that you're feeling with, or like racing thoughts that are going through your head. And then you can like scratch it out or rip it up, that piece of paper, or just say, you know what, that's not really my truth. Let's write on the other column, the right column, what is my truth? Or how do I want to be feeling? Kind of thing. Because I'll get like a lot of I have a lot of mental activity, too much. And so I gotta find ways to slow my brain down. And for me, what works best for me is getting out in nature. But I understand that is not a reality for a lot of people, especially if you're living in urban environments. But if you can get outside, look at the sky, get by a park or some kind of grassy area or a little garden, any kind of source of like running water, even if it's just like a little artificial fountain, that can also be really grounding and healing as well.
Yeah, because that was going to be one of my next questions for you, is just like, with all this advice and with all this chatter, and as an expert who sees so many different modalities, it's like, what are your practices? Like, what is your baseline? Like, what do you feel like you need to do to like just be coherent in the world, as a mom, as a researcher, as a healer?
Well, I would say definitely a work in progress. I want to make it clear that I'm not pretending to be perfect by any means. I would say a lot of times I feel like a hot mess. Or am I doing this right? Like, what's happening? What year is it? But I think like my non-negotiables are getting a good night's sleep. So going to bed early, normally around 10. And really try not to be on any kind of screen, half an hour to an hour before bedtime. I've noticed that if I watch a TV show or something before I go to bed, that definitely disrupts my sleep. And Another thing is just prioritizing eating meals at regular times, having snacks if I'm, very active those days. And then I am one of those kind of people who likes to be out in nature. So most days of the week, I try to either walk or, go on a hike or a trail run. And that calms down the mental chatter and gets kind of any of that sort of, I don't know, maybe anxious energy, me projecting myself too much in the future, kind of like worrying too much in the future, that kind of stuff. I tend to do that. So that kind of keeps me grounded and just kind of clears out all the wigglies. And it will keep me more grounded, I would say. And like I'm kind of all over the place, and I've learned to be okay with that. And that I've learned actually quite recently, which is pretty surprising. I'm really not I don't think linearly. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm really not a type A person. I'm really not, yes, I'm organized. I'm fairly organized, but my thought process, I actually think one of my strengths is I'm not a linear thinker. So I will go on this like loop-de-loop, I'll ask these, I'll start by asking maybe one question. Let's say I'm working on a research paper. I'm like, okay, well, if this is true, what about if this is true? What if A is true? And maybe let's see if B is true. I'll do research and it'll get me down another like research rabbit hole, and then I'll end up, in a totally different endpoint than what I originally thought. And I'm actually okay with that. But I've learned also the beauty of like having a structured outline when I'm writing can also help, because sometimes the stuff just kind of hangs in the ether or in my mental space, kind of have like a mental outline, but it helps me if I write an outline. And then for my energetic work, it's the same. And I always like tell my, especially new clients before I work with them, like I don't work linearly. It's not gonna be, let's work on this chakra, then this or layer of the aura, and then, your original soul wound and tie it in a nice neat bow. It's usually like spirit or that person will show me what they need to be looked at first. And then it's like a journey. Okay. And then we look over here and then, okay, well, what about this? Okay. Well, why is that? What is that interference? So I ask those kind of questions, and then okay, we go on this little journey, a yellow brick road, if you will, but it's definitely not linear. So I will say that I'm more accepting of being imperfect and kind of my imperfect, non-linear way of working. And time management, I've actually always been pretty good about time managing and prioritizing, projects and stuff. And I've learned, especially being a mom, like I got to take care of myself first. Otherwise I'm not going to be a good mom. I'm not going to show up. I'm not going to be a good mom. I'm going to be grumpy. I'm going to be like more impatient, or I'm just going to be more checked out, and I don't want to be like that. And it's same with, the other work that I do. So I have to put my needs first. And I've learned that means me being outside a few times, doing some sort of movement outside a few days a week, eating well, prioritizing sleep. And then I need to be in charge of my schedule. I don't like being micromanaged. I don't like having to go into an office, have someone breathing down my neck. I don't like them saying you gotta, check in at 9 and then check out at 5. I like to set my own schedule, as I work from home and things come up and I gotta go shopping, otherwise we're not gonna eat, or, I gotta pick my kid up from school at this time because he's got something going on, or it's a really beautiful sunny day, I need to take a hike right now. So that's another big thing for me. I need to have that flexibility of my schedule.
Yeah. Cause how does that, obviously it's a priority, but like, how do you make that work? I mean, it's like, if you do have like client work, like on the clock at like a certain time, it's like, yeah, it's not a boss telling you to check in or check out, but it's like, if you have like a meeting coming up or a healing session coming up, and then like, yeah, you do have to like go do something else. Like, how do you manage that? Like just being in the world?
So I set my calendar. So when somebody books a session, I have my online calendar set at certain times that work for me. And that I know is not going to, hopefully, of course things will come up last minute, but shouldn't conflict with my personal needs or any family obligations. And also the past few years, I've working less hours so that I can focus on managing family stuff, being that kind of momager, if you will. So yeah. So and my nervous system, I've learned that my nervous system doesn't do well with burnout, high levels of stress, lots of different deadlines, lots of juggling lots of different projects and things like that. I've learned that I don't thrive in those kind of situations. So I have to tone it down.
Well, even just when you said like, oh, I'm taking on like fewer clients and like less work, that, yeah, I mean, obviously that's like that impacts your family, but also I was just hit with, it just feels like that would allow you to even be more resourced for the people that you are working with and really be able to get in there. And like, rather than having that scattered feeling of like, oh, I'm trying to fit in like so many sessions today,
right,
where you feel like all over the place, where you're probably even more effective as a healer in having the limited, time spans.
Right. Yeah. And I want to be present and I want to be effective. And I want to be excited for the session. And I want to feel like, oh man, I'm tired, or like, oof, I'm like looking at my clock because I have to go to another appointment, or, whatever. So yeah, and it's, something I've learned over time, but it doesn't behoove anybody to be burnt out. And, I've also part of it too comes from kind of like a deep family deprogramming of like not working in the corporate world, making a conscious decision to not uphold those kind of unsustainable workloads and timetables. I'm not playing that game.
Yeah. I mean, again, as far as being a healer, like that's being a healer, it even over and above like the work that you one-on-one do with people, like just living in that space of saying like, I'm rejecting this paradigm. I feel like the more people that can do that, the more available it is. Right.
It's interesting. Yeah, exactly. And I do want to recognize that I am very lucky. I have financial stability, and that's not a reality for so many people. So, I mean, I just want to say that. But I do think that, you can set the intention of, that paradigm shift. And hopefully that's what we're moving towards too, because it's not sustainable for so many. And it's just our nervous system and our health. We're not meant to be sitting indoors, sitting down for so many hours under high stress situations. So yeah. And it's interesting, the more that I set these boundaries, I also will get more opportunities too that are more in alignment, with these flexible freelance, science writing opportunities and things like that.
Because, I mean, that was another thing that I wanted to pick up when we were talking about social media, because a lot of times, again, there's that way that social media changed from being sort of like a fun thing to like stay in contact with your friends, to like being this like place where you're supposed to market your business now, so it's like, in rejecting that paradigm, like how do you get clients coming to you? Like how do you, is it just serendipitous that people find you, or
I was gonna say, I still don't know, honestly, because I'm the worst business person, to be honest. Like, but I think people, from what I've heard, some of me heard from another previous podcast on Spirit Baby Radio. I got a fair amount of clients from that who were looking to conceive, or having issues conceiving, or suffering through pregnancy loss. And then I think people have Googled. I think more recently I've gotten clients who have Googled medical intuitive or medical intuition, and they found me.
So are you getting a lot of folks like in Spain? I mean, since that's where you live?
No. I would say 95% are from the US, occasionally from Canada, occasionally from Europe, like France or Switzerland. But like I said, it's just not on people's radar here in Spain for this kind of work. And they don't want to, most people don't want to pay what I charge, because it's not included in that public healthcare system. So there's sort of that mentality like, well, why do I have to pay extra for this service?
Whereas in the States, everyone's used to, paying out of pocket, right?
Right. Or like for acupuncture session, they tend to be quite inexpensive, 45 euros. And that's not what I charge. I don't want to charge that right now. For maybe one day, I'll open it up, to get some new clients, and, maybe it is a center here where I live, like an acupuncture center, energy healing center. But I just don't have the time, to do that right now, to be going back and forth, and it, the time, like the return on investment is just not worth it for me right now.
Yeah, because it's energetically expensive to do the kind of deep work that you do. I mean, as far
Right.
as
Yeah.
like your recovery after a session, I mean, you obviously have good boundaries. And again, we talked about grounding and everything, but it's got to take a lot out of you, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're like, I would say as a healer, you're holding, I would say I'm not like the magician or the wizard in Fantasia where I'm quote unquote doing all the work and all the magical healing stuff. But I think what I'm doing as a healer is I'm holding space for that healing to occur, to open that up. And I'm a communicator. So I'm, kind of like a liaison between the physical world and the spiritual world. And I'm, giving key messages to the client, and that'll spark their healing as well. And I'm just opening up a space and holding the space for them to heal. And I always ask for permission, like, is this okay? You want to do this? Just to be clear, I'm, not the sole healer here. You are an active part. You're doing the healing, and you also have, guides and source who are helping you with this healing. I never like to say I'm, the healer, but yeah, either way, it's still, yeah, it requires a lot of energy and, holding your own and not enmeshing with your client as well, having strong energetic boundaries.
well, again, coming back to that idea of precision, that we were talking about earlier, I feel like that precision is energetically expensive, to be able
Yeah.
to to stay focused in that vibe, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. 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 I mean, it's definitely a different mindset. I mean, I'm not in a full trance or anything like that. I'm fully conscious, but yeah, it does require a lot of brain power, and focus for sure.
And this is like a total jump off into a new subject, but yeah, you live in Spain, like we were talking about, and so you're fully bilingual. And like, does that affect your sort of clairvoyance at all? Or like, how does that, having that second language rattling around in there, like from being a native English speaker, like how does that, do you find that energetically like a different experience to speak in two different languages, or when
Well, I
you're
actually
dealing
speak
with,
three.
oh shit, look at
Oh,
you.
yeah. So where we live,
Oh, you speak
the
Catalan then
language is
too, yeah?
Catalan. And
Yeah.
actually, I've been the longer I've lived here, the more Catalan I speak. So I actually speak more Catalan now than Spanish. And for those who don't know, Catalan is its own language. It's not a dialect of Spanish. And I think there's only about 1 million speakers. So it's one of those languages that's in danger of disappearing. It's kind of a mix of Spanish and French. There's also like if you speak Portuguese, you can understand Catalan, or Italian, you can understand Catalan. But it's definitely its own language. And so um I've had sessions, most of my sessions, since most of my clients are from the US or Canada, then they're in English. But I'm finding that a lot of times that my English has gotten worse, and then
Ah.
I'll have hard times remembering certain words or phrases in English because it'll come to me faster in Catalan or sometimes Spanish. But I would say it doesn't affect my clairvoyance in any way. I would say, but I love languages because you really get an insight into the way a culture thinks, and kind of their worldview. So I just think it's just another way. I think I'm more open to seeing other people's perspectives, and their point of views, I guess, in a way.
Oh, I love that answer. That's so beautiful. Oh my gosh. Because yeah,
And
I
what
was,
I really love about Spanish and Catalan, and I think Romance languages in general, is they have what's called the subjunctive. They kind of have this sort of imaginal realm aspect to them, like, oh, if this were to happen, like hypothetical situations, very tied to emotions and hopes and dreams and things like that. So I really appreciate that aspect of the languages as well.
well, and like as a clairvoyant, I mean, as you were learning the languages, like, was there a point when you could see the energy before you knew the vocab?
Okay. So this is what happens to me a lot is I'll see the word.
Mm,
So I'll see the word written out. I with my clairvoyance, I've noticed a lot that I'll see words written
mm.
a lot. So I'll see an image of it, and I'm like, oh, how do you see that? How do you see that again? So yeah. So definitely will work in that kind of visual way for sure.
Because like as a kid, again, like way before I, quote unquote knew I, was clairvoyant or psychic or anything, that I remember, in being in German class, as a kid, and the teacher trying to teach us new vocab, and she was like, yeah, does anyone know what this means? And I would be like, this, and like I remember my classmates being like, how did you know that? And I'd be like, I don't know, and like now I'm like, oh, of course, I was just like seeing the energy, but it's like funny. It was funny at the time.
I've used that tactic too with my kids when they're pre-verbal or just learning how to speak, and you're like, man, I need subtitles for this. And I can't tell you how many times they would communicate something or try to communicate something, and I would just see the image of it. And I'd be like, oh, okay, you're hungry, you want this, or oh, you're tired, or oh, you have a stomach ache or whatever. My husband be like, how did you know that? I'm like, oh, I just saw the image for it. And he was like, all right.
Well, Allison, this has been amazing. I'm so glad to just connect with you and hear about all these amazing things that you do. Like I was, like excited, to log on and see you just again as a friend, but also like intimidated. I was like, man, I got to bring my A game, because it's like, again, like you were saying, it's like no bullshit. You're not going to like dick around as far as like, soft pedaling things. And I so appreciate that about you. And I hope that comes across today to my listeners.
Well, life's too short for, getting the runaround is what I say. It's like, just get to the damn point already.
Well, so as far as the damn point, what have I missed? What else is on your brain and on your heart that you feel like sharing that I've missed so far in our conversation?
I would say that like we're just complicating things too much. I think it's like I think we need to work on getting back to nature and getting in touch with the natural cycles of nature, and getting back in touch with our bodies and our own intuition, instead of always feeling we have to outsource it, or that we have to quote unquote know everything, or there has to be a study to prove it, or we have to biohack our way, to get healthy. I think we just have to get back to basics. And spiritually, again, it's like following your own inner compass, as cheesy as that sounds, instead of, again, outsourcing your answers or using one particular approach or one particular leader, quote unquote, depending on who it is, if you know what I mean, to get your answers or to heal. I think the healing is with, we all have an ability to heal. We all have a spiritual nature to us. And it's just a matter of, tapping back into that and knowing that it resides within us, and that to be healthy, it's not so complicated. Like eat locally, eat whole foods you can pronounce as much as possible. Keep it simple, reduce toxin exposure, healthy relationships, and get out in the damn sun every day. I don't think we have to like biohack our way to that. You know what I mean? Because we live in a technologically advanced world doesn't mean our health and our spirituality has to be like that.
Yeah, I love that full circle way of looking at things. Cause when you sort of said like, just simplify, don't the biohacking, trying to like jump levels through that. It's so tempting to feel like you can fast track something, but like you were saying, like slow down.
Everybody wants a magic bullet, but I mean, have they ever worked? Especially long-term, or are they sustainable? Most of them are not. And most of them are scams. They want all your money, giving you false promises. And then, you realize that you're on the road to nowhere, and you're just back where you left off, except you got thousands of dollars less in your pocketbook. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. I take a more practical approach to things, and I'm anti-scamming. And that's also why I've steered away from like the functional medicine approach too. And I really don't adhere, I say that I am into quantum biology, but that's not all that I focus on, because I don't want to get too kind of myopic in my approach. But functional medicine, I've seen it going down this direction of, again, like too many tests that are too expensive that people can't afford, too many supplement recommendations that are too expensive, people can't afford. And also it's like missing the bigger picture. Again, it's like focusing on one pathway or one gene expression or one enzyme, or, et cetera, et cetera. And looking at the bigger picture, it's like, okay, well, do you have healthy relationships? Like, do you feel confident in you? Why do you feel comfortable in your own skin? Do you know how to listen to your body? Was there a traumatic event that happened that's, triggering all this stuff? Because if you don't deal with that, no supplement or, red light therapy or whatever the hell is not gonna, or, HIIT training session is not going to solve the underlying, issue. And I would say most physical issues stem from an energetic, emotional, spiritual, cause.
Yeah. And which it's like, it's become so easy to, when I think of my, just Western doctor that I see here in Chicago for my, yearly checkups or whatever. And it's like, it's easy to be like, oh yeah, she doesn't understand energy. And so it's like, I'll go see her for whatever. But then it is really easy then to like take that hope that a doctor is going to solve something and put it on, either, additional supplementation or some sort of other savior kind of thing, that it's transferring that from Western medicine to another modality. And like, that's not the vibe
natural,
either.
Right. Because it seems more natural. And I've seen that with herbs and stuff. Like I had a client who was recommended by traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, these different herbs, because she had a lot of histamine issues, so like hives and swelling of the throat and things like that, and gut issues. And I was like, actually, your issue is that your body is rejecting that, because that's not the remedy. The remedy is you being comfortable in your skin and fully owning your uniqueness and your unique, authentic self that you've been programmed to not embody. And so that's where the antidote
Did she just like burst into tears instantly when you said that? I mean, I would have.
The antidote is you rejecting that programming and embodying your true nature. Right? Your body's trying to tell you that this herbs and all this crap is not the antidote, even if it's natural, even though, it looks great on text, in the textbook and stuff, your textbook case for this. But, you got to always I always look at the energetic source. Yeah. She was like, oh yeah, there you go. And I was like, that's the root of your issue. Your body is literally allergic to this programming. That's why you have histamine issues, because your body is reacting to this energetic programming that is a disconnect for your authentic, true energy. So it's like, yeah, she can be on antihistamine. She can be on probiotics that, reduce histamine producing microbes in her gut, et cetera, but that's not really getting to the root of her problem, because it's energetic. And, stems probably from the womb or, preconception. So, we go there. But that's what I mean. Like, I don't take a linear approach. So it's like this wandering thing. And a lot of times I'll go back in time, see a timeline and I'll go back in time and stuff like that. But like you were saying, yeah. So going from one drug to then, supplements because it's natural, or biohacking, technology or approach is just substituting one, for the other. The same approach. It's like that attacking, that being very hyper-focused kind of thing, and it doesn't work.
Well, so for people who are ready to break out of that paradigm and they want to come get some of the wisdom that you're offering and the groundedness and the holistic viewpoints, where do people find you? How can they work with you?
You can find me at my website. It's probably the best way to reach me. And that's AllisonClarkIntuitive.com. So it's ALLISON CLARK intuitive.com. And so I have my social media up there too, my email, my blog, book a session, all that kind of stuff. Oh, my Instagram is Allison Clark Intuitive as well. But like I said, it's conventional social media. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag.
Like, be ready for it. Be ready for the rants. Yeah.
Yeah. Rants I post when I want. No fancy editing or technological skills. What you see is what you get.
Well, thank you so much for spending all this time with me. Oh my gosh, this was amazing.
It was super fun.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of I'll Follow You. Don't forget that you can always find show notes over on my website, queenofpeaches.com. Links to and for previous episodes are listed there as well. While you're there, I hope you might find another episode that strikes your fancy. All my recordings are assembled in my home studio using the free open-source cross-platform editing software Audacity. I use a Logitech G Snowball Ice microphone and Shure SRH 440 professional studio headphones. The theme music is from the song Without You, written by Brian Cremens and performed by the band 1000. This podcast is made possible by the fact that I work a full-time job, am happily married, and don't have any children. That's what really goes on behind the scenes of this artistic life.